In this series of videos, we are talking about employee relations, how to deal with employee relations at your small business or medium from start to finish, from really the time that you're looking to hire them all the way to the time that you have to deal with unemployment benefits because you have separated employment with them. Last video, we actually made it specific to what are the best practices that you look at in terms of looking to hire. In this video, we'll talk about hiring and what really goes behind the scene. That's the one we'll do now. So here's hiring right there. Imagine that in order to have a new hire, you have to get them through a pipeline of steps. And each step you have to really pay attention to and make sure that you're compliant on how you're doing it. So the first step or the first piece of the pipeline would be about interviews. What are the best practices there? How would you do interviews in a consistent way? The other step, now that you interviewed some folks, now you need to move them forward. The person that you have selected or the individuals you have selected, you need to check some references there. What are the best practices there? And once that is done, then how the offer really works. What's in the offer letter and how can you make an offer letter for them? Once you do the offer, of course, it needs to be pending that you run background checks, criminal background checks. You can't do criminal background checks before you offer them the job. You have to do it after. That's labor law or employment law. Once the background check is clear and all good there, then it's time to build a file for those new hires. So these are the steps to really get a good asset to your team, to your business that could just support you. So let's dig deep into each step. First one is the interviews. Best practices. Also, imagine you have these folks here, they're all interested and they want to come and they have applied and they're ready for the interview. This is your interview pipeline. You're going to get them all towards that interview. And at the end, you're going to come up with, let's say, with one person. That's the person that you are selecting. So how can you really get through this? One of the best practices is to have a questionnaire. You need to ask them, those individuals or those candidates, ask them the same questions. Don't change the questions. Maybe you could tweak from here and there, but have the same basic questions that are related to the job position that you are looking to hire for, and ask them all the same questions. Once you ask them all the same questions, take notes of their answers. And then after you're done with that process, then you will really figure who is the person that gave you the best answer, have the best experience, best knowledge, a person who is a fit, and that's the one you do want to select and move forward with. Now, those other guys that you have interviewed and you didn't select, one of the best practices to deal with their paperwork, the interview notes that you have, is to keep those notes with you for your own records for 1 year. Why do you need to keep those records with you for 1 year? So imagine this person right here, this candidate, calls you later and says, hey, I had an interview with you last week. What's the update? Am I getting the job, or what are you looking for? What's next? What are you going to tell those guys? The bottom line answer is we have moved forward with a candidate that best fit our needs. We wish you all the best. It's not you. You could definitely apply again if you see any other opportunity with us. And that's it. You leave it at that. You don't tell them any details in regards to the questionnaire that you went through with them, the answers that they gave you, anything in that regard. There's nothing that you need to mention. Now that you have selected that person and you need to move forward with them, They're right here. Now it's time to do reference check. In terms of reference check, there's an employer reference or employer references, and there's personal or professional references that you want to look into. In regards to employer references, you're really able to do only two things. One is confirm who the employer is and confirm the time that they worked at that employer. There are a lot of even HR folks that would call other employers and they would be asking them questions like, would you hire this person again? How was their attendance record? Did they got themselves involved in any disciplinary action? What do you think about that? And they ask all those questions. In labor law, it is actually against the law to answer any of those questions without clear consent from the person who we're talking about. And because that previous employer doesn't have that person there, so it's very hard to get that consent, and therefore it is best. The law is really telling you could just confirm two things: that they worked for you and what time they worked for you. That's all. If they ask you any other questions, then you say, I'm not allowed to give you any details. If they do need to get details about how you're doing and all that, that's in the personal and professional references. In there, you could ask the what, the how, the when, have a great conversation with people that they worked with and ask them and tailor your questions towards their behavior and how they do work, how they achieve assignments, what they struggle with, and all that. But you won't be able to get that information from a previous employer. And I put a remember here. It is very important that you do remember to document all this process, because if something comes up and you're not going to move forward with this candidate after you're checking their references, then you want to have clear documented information there that tells you why. In the HR world, we believe that if it's not written somewhere, it's never happened. So you do want to make sure you have that documentation. Once all that is cleared, you want to move forward with the offer. Before you do that, you want to make sure that you close the interview pipeline. You're not interviewing anymore. That's it. You have decided who you're going to move with, and you can't make an offer and people are still applying, or you're still interviewing, or someone else from your management team is still interviewing. That just may cause a lot of challenges. Once that is closed, then let's talk about the job offer letter. What should be in that letter? Best practices again. Of course, one of the most important thing is the date. Let's have a date in there. Let's have the name of the position, the rate of pay, how much you're going to pay them. And then talk about the benefits. What are you going to offer them? Vacation hours, paid time off, holidays, holiday pay, 401k, do you have any insurance, life insurance, medical insurance, dental insurance, vision, all that stuff, then you could mention it there. But you do want to make sure that in the offer letter that you say or you state that this is pending, that you run the criminal background check. And it's also pending the flexibility and availability that they told you during the interview. Because a lot of them may change things later and may say, oh, I can't work Tuesdays and Thursdays. I know I told you this, I'm sorry. And what are you going to do with that? It's going to be a whole other game. So you want to make sure that that offer is stating those pending information that you need to look into, or contingencies. And then make sure that they are signed. So the offer letter would be signed by the candidate, and you keep a copy. You keep the original for your records with the signature, and then you give them a copy. Once the offer is done, now it's time to run the background check. Make sure you run the background check, as we said, after they accept your offer. Make sure you have clear documentation that they accepted your offer, which is the signature there. You have clear documentation that they authorized you to run the background check. So that's the consent form. Can't do it without that. So you have to have that clear information there. And make sure they fully complete the application to run the background check. Normally, the background check has a section that talks about if they did have any misdemeanor, another section that talks about if they did have any felony, and another section that talks about um, where they lived in the past 7 years in most applications, because you do need to connect background check vendors that you deal with do need to connect with the court system in the places where those guys were living, because there are federal information or federal um, law that could go around the country and you could pull from any court. And there are some that is just local to the communities where the people live. So usually the background check, the criminal background check, look at both situations there. Now, when they complete the application, they may say yes to one of the law infractions there. Maybe they did have a felony or a misdemeanor, or maybe they will just say no, I didn't have any. Or there's that third option where they could mistakenly report a felony or a misdemeanor. What does that mean? In most cases that I've seen, they would just, instead of selecting no, I didn't have a felony or a misdemeanor, they select yes by mistake. That could happen. Now, once you get the results, the result could be divided into 3 steps or 3 areas. One is clear. You got nothing there. There's nothing in the background check. Or it is not clear. It does have some infractions there or some law infractions there. Or it could be inconclusive. So we'll talk about each one. Let's say if it is clear. When it is clear, you do want to go back to the application itself that they completed, and you do want to see what they stated there in the application. Did they say that no, they actually didn't have any law infraction? Well, guess what? You got a clear background check, so you're good to go to move with the next step. If they did say, yes, I did have a law infraction, and you're getting nothing in your report, then you do want to, make a decision of do you want to still look into something else here, or do you need to do any next step, or still continue to move forward? So it's always good to compare the information you're getting from the report, the background check report, with the application that they mentioned there. Also, if it is not clear and it does have some law infractions that may have happened in the past, you want to go back again to the application. And if they are saying, no, I didn't have any law infraction, and you found something, you could disqualify them based on honesty. They weren't honest with you. You don't even need to dig deep into any other reason. You have clear documentation that the background check report is saying that they did have this issue, and they're saying they didn't have, and that is considered dishonesty. If they said, yes, I did have some law infraction, it was this, it was that, and they tell you the story, and pretty much you found the same story or similar, very similar in the report, then you do want to make a decision as to, do you want to move forward and offer them the job, or do you want to pause and not offer them the job? If you don't want to offer them the job, you do want to make sure that you justify your reason. You do want to make sure that you justify that based on the history that they have, that you have found in your background check, you feel there is a concern for your organization to have this candidate work with you. Whether it is a safety reason or a concern of theft or anything in that regard. But you do want to make sure you have some type of justification and you could move forward. You still, you do want to explain to the candidate as well, because you already offered them the job. You do want to reach out to them and let them know that you received the report and the report is confirming whatever that they mentioned, and therefore your company have made the decision to not move forward. Always as a manager, remove yourself from all this process. Just, you're talking on behalf of the company. And then if it is inconclusive, if that option comes up, usually it will come up if they misspell their name in the application, so they couldn't really find anybody by John Smith, for example, or they did not write their social security correctly, or something in that regard. That could come as inconclusive, and you might need to reach out to them and get a better data so that the background check vendor could run it again. Let's say it's all clear and you want to move forward to the next step. Next step is really to build the file for them. What is going to be in their file? One of the number one things that needs to be in the file is called I-9 verification. What is I-9 verification? The country really tells you that you need to hire folks that are legal to work in the country, not illegal. And they give you information of how can you determine that? How can you determine if the candidate that you're offering the job are legal to work or they have a permit to work in the US or not? There is a form for that you could Google and find out. It's called I-9 form, and you have to complete. And the candidate actually needs to complete. They put their information there that actually shows that they are authorized to work in the US. The law, the employment law, says that you need to do this I-9 verification within 3 business days from the date that they start with you at your company. If you do it later than 3 days and you got audited, then there is a penalty a charge that you may get up. It's very expensive, but it really has to do with how long you've been employed and for how long you haven't checked the I-9. So it is very important that you do that. The next document that you want to have is called the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. It's a form that with that form, you're telling the government that you have hired an employee, a citizen, or someone who has an authorization to work in the US, and therefore you are looking to see if you could get a tax credit. It's actually a great benefit for employers out there, getting a tax credit. For example, if you have hired someone who was on unemployment benefits for a long time, the government will give you some credit, some tax credit, just because you hired them. The tax credit will be at the maximum amount of your Social Security, your employer Social Security tax, but it is still a good tax credit to have. Or if they had a felony in the past year, and you have still decided to offer them the job because you believe that you could give them a second chance and you want to support them, the government will reward you for that by giving you a tax credit. So this form is for that type of reasons. Then you want to give them a form where they could put their contact information. It's very important that you have that in the employee file. Also, the emergency contact. You never know if something happens to them in your place, who you're going to contact to let them know that something is happening to them. And also you want to make sure that they sign your policies acknowledgement. So you're going to give them your handbook or the policies that you have, and you're going to make sure that they sign, understanding that it is their responsibility to abide by your policies. And that's the handbook right there. Also, you do want to make sure that you get their payroll information so that you could start paying them. If you are doing the benefit of direct deposit, then you get their account number and stuff like that. And then from the other side, so all that information goes into one bucket or one file. Then the rest, then you open up another file for them, and we'll call that a medical file. A medical file is really for reasons that are specifically medical. So if they come up to you one day and they say, I need to be out because I need to take a leave of absence. I have medical, issues and I need to deal with. Then you go through that route of leave of absence and all that. All that information will go into the medical file. It shouldn't be mixed up with the regular employee file. Also, if they call sick and they continue to call sick for a few days and your policy is really stating that you need some medical note from the doctor that is stating that they're able to work around food, if you're selling food, or around anything, all those documentation will go in the medical file. And here it is, we're done. If you do like this, or you feel, it's just some good knowledge out there, why not? And if you feel that you could, or you know someone that might benefit from this, please share, like, and I appreciate it.